Oh, what look 10 feet into the water. Bridget Fonda was a child of one of Hollywood's greatest acting families. So why did she seem to disappear off the face of the earth, once hailed as one of the most luminous faces of her generation? Bridget didn't just carry fame. She carried legacy from the fierce vulnerability of Ali Jones in Single White Female to the steely resolve of Maggie in Point of No Return, and the quiet charm in Singles. Her presence was unforgettable. But what the cameras never captured was the silence she was slowly slipping into behind her poised elegance and piercing roles. Was a quiet woman gradually breaking under the weight of expectations no one ever truly understood. This isn't just a story of an actress who left Hollywood. This is the story of a soul who once whispered in the dark, "I don't belong here anymore." Before we begin, we'd love to hear from you on a scale from 0 to 10. How would you rate Bridget Fonda as an actress? Your opinion truly matters. It's unbelievable. Jet Li. Yeah, it's unbelievable. Yeah, in the golden haze of Hollywood spotlight, where legacies are born and bloodlines often define destiny, Bridget Fonda entered the world not as just another child, but as an heir to one of the most iconic acting dynasties in American history, born on January 27th, 1964, in Los Angeles, California. Her arrival into the Fonda family tree seemed to promise a future glittering with red carpets, award stages, and cameras, forever chasing her name. Yet beneath this aura of cinematic nobility was a childhood not painted in fame, but in fractures. Her father, Peter Fonda, had become a countercultural icon after his groundbreaking work in the 1969 film Easy Rider, while her grandfather, Henry Fonda, had already cemented his place as a legend with classics like 12, Angry Men, and The Grapes of Wrath. Her aunt, Jane Fonda, was fast becoming one of the most influential actresses and activists of her time. With a lineage like this, expectations weren't whispered, they were shouted. Bridget wasn't just a child. She was a torchbearer. But the home she grew up in wasn't always warmed by the glow of that legacy. Bridget's parents, Peter Fonda and Susan Brewer, divorced when she was just 10 years old. The disintegration of their marriage left behind emotional debris that no spotlight could erase. She and her brother Justin were uprooted from what little stability they had known. Bridget would go on to live with her mother, and later her stepmother, Portia Crockett, alongside her half-brother Thomas. The move between homes and the emotional terrain that came with it etched deep fissures in her early sense of safety. She once described the experience not in dramatic outbursts, but in subtle recollections of feeling out of place. Her father, enigmatic and troubled in his own ways, often disappeared into his roles into the haze of the era's drugs and rebellion. He was there, yet not present in public, but distanced in the moments that mattered most to a young girl looking for a father's grounding hand at school. Bridget carried a name that others couldn't ignore. Thunder came with an unspoken script already written for her classmates and teachers alike. Viewed her not as Bridget, the shy, quiet girl with curious eyes, but as a living extension of Hollywood royalty. It wasn't admiration, it was expectation. Every small stumble was met, not with forgiveness, but with comparison. Every effort was measured not against her own journey, but against the towering shadows of Henry, Peter, and Jane. Even in those early years, the notion of self seemed elusive. Was she acting because she loved the craft, or because the world assumed she would her earliest appearance in film as a toddler? In Easy Rider was less a debut and more a declaration. The Fonda legacy continues, but for Bridget, who was too young to choose, it was the beginning of a lifelong question. Where did the family name end? And she began her adolescence was spent between two contrasting worlds, the chaotic pulse of Los Angeles and the quiet, reflective nature of Paradise Valley, Montana, where her stepmother raised her. If Los Angeles was a city of masks and performance, Montana was the backstage stripped of pretense. It was there that Bridget may have found moments of clarity, even if fleeting, about who she was away from the Fonda mythology. But even in solitude, the echoes of expectation were never far behind. She enrolled in the Lee Strasberg Theater Institute and later attended NYU's Tisch School of the Arts, trying to mold her own voice amidst the chorus of past greatness. It was here that the fractures of her childhood began to influence her artistic expression. In private journals and quiet confessions she spoke of never quite feeling enough, as if every accolade she might earn would never silence the voice inside her, whispering, "You should have been better." Perhaps the most poignant pain in Bridget's early life was the emotional distance that pervaded her relationships. Her father, by his own later admissions, was often emotionally unavailable, caught in his own battles with identity and addiction. While he loved his children, he struggled to express it in a way that nurtured them. And for Bridget, a girl growing up in a world that demanded poise, brilliance, and composure, that lack of emotional anchoring became a silent wound she carried into adulthood. There is no singular moment that defines her childhood pain. Rather, it's the accumulation of unspoken things, the birthday parties missed, the quiet tears behind closed doors, the times she was told she should be proud of her lineage, when all she wanted was to be seen for who she truly was. Fame, for Bridget, was not a dream. It was an inheritance she never asked for, wrapped in gold and tied with invisible expectations. Her mother, Susan Brewer, an artist herself, provided a softer, more introspective counterbalance to the fonder legacy from her. Bridget may have inherited a love for nuance, stillness, and the unsaid. But even Susan couldn't shield her daughter from the external narrative that always framed her life. You are a founder. Therefore, you must become something extraordinary. As she stepped further into adolescence, the tension between who she was and who the world wanted her to be grew sharper in acting. School, she worked tirelessly, driven not by ambition but by the quiet desperation to be worthy, not of awards but of existence beyond her surname. It was a kind of internalized performance, one not meant for the stage but for her own survival. In the end, the pain of Bridget Fonda's childhood isn't told in scandal or explosive headlines. It is told in the silences between conversations, in the way she would later disappear from the public eye, choosing anonymity over applause. Her retreat from the world was not an escape, but perhaps a return to the girl who once sat in Montana fields far from Hollywood, imagining what it might feel to simply be herself. I'm getting out of the way. Yeah, I am. Oh, my God, I'm gonna die. Bridget Fonda's career began not with a roar, but with a quiet determination emerging from the towering shadow of her family's cinematic legacy. She stepped onto Hollywood's stage in the 1980s, not as a starlet, chasing fame, but as a woman searching for her own voice, in a world that already thought it knew her story. Her early roles were modest, reflective of someone paying her dues, yet each performance carried the subtle intensity of someone who wasn't just acting. She was trying to be seen in 1990. She landed a pivotal role in The Godfather Part 3, a project so weighted with expectation that even a supporting performance required emotional precision for Bridget. It was a threshold, her name finally standing on its own in the credits of one of cinema's most iconic sagas, but the real breakthrough came 2 years later. 1992 marked her arrival as a leading lady in Single White Female. She portrayed Allie Jones, a woman caught in a psychological spiral that mirrored in some ways the fragility she often spoke of in her own life. The film was a box office success, and though critics offered mixed reviews, audiences were captivated. That same year, she starred in Cameron Crowe's Singles, where her quiet charm further solidified her image as a relatable, grounded talent in an industry often obsessed with spectacle. By the mid-1990s, Bridget had carved out a space uniquely her own, with roles in films like Point of No Return and It Could Happen to You. She demonstrated versatility, moving effortlessly between action romance and character-driven drama. Her performance in A Simple Plan 1998 was widely praised, with many seeing it as her most emotionally nuanced role. It was a performance of restraint and rawness, where the ache in her eyes said more than any line of dialogue. But Hollywood is rarely kind, for long 1999's Lake Placid, a horror comedy with a hefty budget and high hopes, failed to resonate. Critics were harsh, and some singled out her performance unfairly. CNN described her as having a chronic inability to act a critique that stung deeper than most. It was a cruel commentary, not just on a performance, but on a person who had long wrestled with feelings of inadequacy. That same cruelty would echo louder. Just 2 years later, in 2001, Bridget starred in Monkey Bone, a bizarre blend of live action and stop-motion animation. The film was a commercial disaster, earning a fraction of its $75 million budget for an actress who had once graced magazine covers and held her own opposite legends. This failure felt symbolic. Her career was not merely slowing, it was crumbling under the weight of studio expectations, missteps, and an industry that rarely forgave a woman's misalignment with its narrow definitions of success. And then came the mishap. In the mid-90s, David E. Kelley had offered Bridget the lead role in what would become the groundbreaking TV show. Ali McBeal at the time, television was still viewed as a step down from film, and Bridget, still chasing cinematic credibility, declined the role, went to Callista Flockhart, whose career skyrocketed as a result. Looking back, Bridget remained philosophical. She once said, "I'm not kicking myself. It may work as well as it does." Because of Callista still, the regret lingered in a cruel twist of fate. David E. Kelley would return years later with another offer, a recurring role in his hit legal drama. The practice Bridget accepted. It was a second chance. But in February 2003, just before production began, everything changed. Driving along the Pacific Coast Highway, Bridget's Jaguar lost traction on the rain-slicked road and plunged off the side of an embankment. She suffered fractures to 2 vertebrae in her back. Though she recovered physically, the timing was devastating. The role in the practice, her potential comeback, slipped away. What followed was not a grand announcement of retirement, but a quiet withdrawal. Later that year, in November 2003, she married composer Danny Elfman. The two had crossed paths during the production of A Simple Plan, where Elfman composed the score. By 2005, they welcomed a son. Bridget's silence became complete. No interviews, no appearances, no auditions. Her name faded from casting sheets and tabloid headlines alike when her father, Peter Fonda, passed away in Sikug, 0-19. The world turned to see if she would speak, but there was no statement from Bridget, only a family release and a tribute from her Aunt Jane. The absence of her voice said more than words ever could. She was grieving in private as she had chosen to live in 2022. After more than a decade of public invisibility, paparazzi photos of Bridget surfaced. Her appearance had changed, drawing predictable and often cruel reactions from online spectators. But when asked if she would ever return to acting, she responded simply, "I don't think so. It's too nice being a civilian." It was not a line rehearsed for a role. It was a truth long earned through years of retreat, recovery, and redefinition. Bridget Fonda's career was never just about box office numbers or critical acclaim. It was about a woman trying to find herself amid echoes of legacy in a town that rarely allows quiet souls to breathe. Her story is not one of failure, but of choice. A choice to stop performing for a world that never really saw her, a choice to heal, to protect, to live, and in that choice, there is something deeply moving, something heartbreaking, something beautifully human. She has it. She has it pretty good, and she just keeps pushing for more. Now at 61, Bridget Fonda lives far from the lights and lenses that once defined her. She resides quietly with her husband, Danny Elfman, not in the bustling heart of Los Angeles, but in the calm refuge of Santa Barbara, a coastal retreat that mirrors the peace she has long sought. It's a life chosen, not imposed, a life not shaped by directors or critics, but by love, privacy, and stillness. To the casual observer, her story may seem like one of retreat, but to those who truly understand the soul of an artist, Bridget's disappearance from public life was an act of preservation. Not many in her position would have the courage to walk away at the height of fame, to leave behind red carpets, camera flashes, and applause for something infinitely quieter and arguably more profound: peace. Bridget's legacy does not reside solely in her films, though those remain as quiet testimonies to her craft. It lives in the respect she garnered not by overexposure but by restraint. In an industry obsessed with staying visible, she chose invisibility in a culture that celebrates reinvention. She embraced authenticity. That in itself is an act of quiet rebellion, a refusal to be anything but true. Performances, sharp, vulnerable, understated, continue to resonate with audiences. Fans still return to a simple plan or single white female, not just for nostalgia, but for the depth she brought to every scene. Each role felt lived in, emotionally honest. Her presence was never about dominating the screen, but about enriching it. Colleagues speak of her kindness, her humility, her dedication to the work itself, not to the fame surrounding it. Directors recall her preparation, her intuition, her ability to translate complex emotion into subtle gesture. She was, and remains, an actor's actor, never flashy, always grounded. And perhaps her greatest impact is the permission she gives silently, through her choices for others to step away when the spotlight no longer nourishes them in a world that constantly shouts. Bridget Fonda chose the power of a whisper, and that whisper continues to echo. She reminds us that worth is not measured by screen time, nor legacy by trophies. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in walking away, in choosing self over spectacle, in living a life that feels full even if unseen. Bridget Fonda may no longer be in front of the camera, but the dignity with which she carried her career and the grace with which she stepped away from it is a legacy worthy of reverence. She is not just remembered for the roles she played, but for the woman she chose to become when the roles ended. That woman, quiet, strong, private, deserves not only to be remembered but to be honored. I just want to go back to my tent now. There's a quiet beauty in letting go, in choosing to live. Beyond the applause, Bridget Fonda didn't vanish. She evolved, and in that evolution she taught us something far more lasting than any single performance ever could, that peace is not a surrender but a triumph in the stillness she now inhabits. There is wisdom in her silence, a kind of music in her absence, a powerful presence. She showed us that it is possible to walk away with grace and to live a life not in search of validation, but in pursuit of meaning. The story of Bridget Fonda is not a tragedy. It is a gentle reminder that we all have the right to choose our own ending, to rewrite the final act, to step away, not out of fear, but out of love for the self we've grown into. So today, as we remember the luminous chapters of her career and the unforgettable roles she brought to life, let us also honor the quiet strength she embodies in her life. Now, if her performances ever touched you, if her vulnerability ever mirrored your own or her quiet strength ever gave you courage, we invite you to share your thoughts below. Let this be a space of gratitude. Leave a comment, a memory, a tribute, because though she chose silence, Bridget Fonda's story still speaks softly and with grace to all of us. And in honoring her, we honor every soul who dared to choose peace over performance, every artist who walked away, not in defeat, but in quiet victory. Thank you, Bridget, for everything you gave and everything you chose not to give to you. Remain a light, even from the quiet distance. Her story also challenges the very metrics by which we often measure a life well lived. We are conditioned to equate presence with relevance, fame with success. But Bridget reminds us that there is immense power in absence, that relevance can be timeless, and success can mean simply being at peace with oneself. She is proof that we can be unforgettable, even when we are unseen. Many stars have left the stage, but few have done so with such grace and quiet finality, while some chase a final encore. Bridget wrote her own closing line and walked off, not to disappear, but to reappear in her own life on her own terms. That takes a kind of strength that isn't loud but lasting. We often celebrate comebacks, but rarely do we revere the act of letting go. Perhaps it's time we do. Perhaps Bridget's true gift wasn't just her performances, but the permission she gave us to stop chasing, to start listening, and to trust the quiet. Her choice resonates even more today. In a world drowning in noise, she is a beacon to those who feel overwhelmed by the need to be visible, to be validated, to be everything for everyone. Her life says, "You are enough, even in stillness." We will always remember her face, her voice, her characters. But more than that, we will remember her courage to walk away, to say, "This is enough," and in doing so, to leave us with a legacy not of fading fame, but of enduring dignity. So here's to Bridget Fonda, not just the actress, but the woman who chose serenity over spotlight, truth over applause. May her path inspire others to honor their own rhythm, to embrace silence without shame, and to live with the same quiet conviction. If you carry a memory of her, a favorite role, a moment that moved, you share it. Let this be a space, not just of admiration, but of gentle remembrance, because some stars don't burn out, they simply choose to shine from afar.